In this example, I have some file names in a column where I need to extract the first 8 characters because this gives me the date that the file was created. But on top of that, I want it to be a date type, not just a text. And if I just do the basic option of extracting the first 8 characters using the Text.Start, which is not called left, I am able to extract the first 8 characters, but as you can see, it's actually a text. The column type is any, meaning that this is text and I can't do any date manipulations. If I try, it's just confused here. I can do the parse option, which will give me an error because it can't interpret the input as a date time. So right now I have it as text and I want it to be a date. If I try making another column where I do the exact same thing, I can add an optional argument to the add_column-function, which is right before the furthermost parentheses. I can add comma and then type date, which will assign the column to have the type date, which does change this icon, but it hasn't changed the value here. If this was a date, the value would be on the right side and it would be in cursive, which it isn't. I do have access to this add column date, but if I try to do anything, it will give me an error because it is not actually a date. It's still a string even though the icon suggests that it's a date, and that tripped me up at the beginning. One way to solve this problem is to simply add the function again. After I've made the new column where I just extract the first 8 characters, I can simply click the type of the column and change that to date. And this will work, unlike the first option where I change the type in the add column step. And I think what happens here is that it's evaluating the values inside the rows, which means that both the icon is a date and the values are proper dates, because it now added the dashes which weren't there before, and the value is on the right side and it's in cursive. And afterwards, after I've loaded the table, you can see that it is a proper date type once I get into Power Pivot. But I don't want to have a step where I add a column and then right after I have to immediately change type. That's a pointless step because this should happen in one step. And the solution to that is to actually do a type conversion inside my function, which means that instead of saying Text.Start first 8 characters, I want to wrap this function within the Date.From function, because this will try to convert whatever value I have into a date value, which means that it now has the proper cursive, and on the right side and with the dashes, the column still thinks it's type any, but that can be fixed by adding the type date right at the end of the function, which means I now have a column that has the proper format and it is a date, and I have access to this date add column options. And if I try to extract the month, it will work as it should. Meaning the solution is either to add the column like normal with just a function and then afterwards do this change type step, or you can do it in one step by wrapping your function within Date.From. And the same applies if I wanted it to be a number. I would use Number.From instead. And then of course I need to not say type date, I need to say int64 type. And now it would be the number. But I do want to have it as a date because this is my update date. When I then go into Power Pivot to look at my actual data model, once that's downloaded, it will be mad because I do have errors, and that's as expected. In here, my column where I try to convert this text into a date, that will have failed because you can't convert a text into a date. That doesn't make any sense because it's basically saying that a text string should be a date, but it can't be. A date can either be null or empty or a proper date, which would then be a number. And likewise, month has failed because that gave me an error. But both custom 1 and custom 2 give me a proper date, which we can see up here. And it's converted 11-10-2023 into 11.October, which I never asked for, but that's because it's a format. So I can change back to the original format just by changing it up here. And that doesn't change the underlying data because in Power Pivot you only change the actual formatting, not the values. So that was everything I had to show. Yep,